2026 jewelry trends, styles, and designs to watch. That's what we're going to be covering in today's podcast episode. Now, this is one of my favorite episodes to do. I did one last year, and it's actually one of my most popular videos and podcast episodes. So, of course, we're going to revisit this for 2026, and we're going to talk about what are the trends that we can expect to see this year. Now, as resellers, this actually matters because when we're outsourcing, we want to make sure that we are buying pieces that we know can flip for a decent profit. Also, a lot of us are collectors. And so, if we keep a pulse on what's popular, what's trendy, what's in demand, then it will help us create a much more curated collection. All right, so that is what we're going to be talking about today, jewelry friends. Hello, my name is Desiree, and you know that I am your jewelry reselling bestie. Now, today I want to hurry up and get right into the trends because I don't want to take too much time, and I want this podcast episode to be really thorough and detailed and as specific as I possibly can make it. So before we get into that, I like to always remind you to make sure you check out our website, jewelryresellerspodcast.com, because over there you can opt in to our newsletter. And when you do that, you will get access to a free download that I created that covers the 20 best selling vintage jewelry brands that I think all resellers should know. Also, if you are looking to maybe up your jewelry reselling game, or if you're a beginner, or maybe you just kind of want some support and guidance in this jewelry reselling space, I have created a new learning community. It's called Jewelry Jumpstart, and you can find out more. You can also join for free at jewelryjumpstart.com. All right, jewelry friends, let's go ahead and get right into it. Now, you know that when we talk about trends, styles, and designs, I always like to mention the Pantone color of the year. And the Pantone color of the year for 2026 is Cloud Dancer. It's a soft, airy white with a cool undertone. It's calm, minimal, clean, and intentional. It's not a stark white, but it's not a egg white either. All right, so some of the words that are being used to describe this color are elevated and neutrality, right? Because I think that this choice tells us a lot about buyer psychology in 2026, at least what we're going to be seeing. And I think people are craving a more calm, a more simple, a more clear type of vibe when it comes to home decor, fashion, and of course, jewelry. Now, like I said, I like to mention the Pantone color of the year because a lot of influence will come from this particular color. And we will see that, like I said, in design, in fashion, and also maybe even in some of the styles and color palettes that we may be looking to accessorize with our jewelry, or maybe that our buyers and our customers are looking to complement some pieces that they may already have, or maybe some pieces that they're purchasing that could be tapped in or connected to this color of the year. So again, the Pantone color of the year is called Cloud Dancer. And let me know your thoughts. It's another neutral, it's another kind of minimal aesthetic, but it's very basic, so it's not hard or difficult to incorporate a color like this, no matter what you're doing. All right, so that's what we got for the color of the year. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the trends that we're going to see for 2026. And I have this broken down by types of jewelry. So we're going to cover necklaces. We're also going to cover earrings and bracelets, brooches, rings, and some other things that I think I'm going to throw in there for good measure. So let's go ahead and get started. So, concerning necklaces in 2026, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of collar and torque necklaces. All right, this is that rigid or semi rigid metal collar type of design. Of course, you can find them in sterling silver, gold tone, and mixed metals. And it's a really smooth, slightly sculptural type of style. A lot of estate torque necklaces from the 60s through the 90s, I think are going to be very much in demand. You can look for designers such as George Jensen as well as Tiffany and Co., especially the Elsa Peretti era. All right, so that's what we got first for necklaces for 2026. Now, also, number two in the necklace category, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of long pendant and Y necklaces. These are those long chains. Now, I also saw an article about this that the layered long chain look is definitely making a comeback, and I have been seeing that in some New York New York magazines and some New York advertisements. So I think this is pretty much right on track. Also, the lariat style Y-shaped necklaces, I do have a few of those and they do tend to sell really well. Also, leather or cord with metal pendants and necklaces that are adjustable lengths. Now, I think this is going to create more options, more versatility for your buyers as it relates to how they style this particular piece, because you can either layer them, you can kind of double them up, or you can just wear them long, depending on, the look and the style and the functionality that you may need with this particular piece. So the vintage sweet spot for these types of necklaces are going to be the 1990s and going through the early 2010s. All right, because I remember this type of necklace was really popular. I want to say in the late 90s, at least if I remember correctly. All right, number three, we've got snake necklaces. Now, the snake motif has always been popular. I don't think this is ever going to go out of style. So we've got flexible snake chains, snake motif pendants, and full snake collars or wrap. All right, now when I say snake necklaces, I'm talking about the design, not necessarily snake skin jewelry. All right, so this would be snake. This would also be serpent. Is another good keyword for you to use if you are trying to sell or list some pieces like this. These types of designs and styles are very popular in estate jewelry. And of course, you can kind of relate them to 70s and 80s statement piece jewelry. That's when I think the snake motif really had its popularity, its heyday, so to speak. So also, when we are talking about the serpent motif, pay attention to some of the more ancient styles, like with the Egyptian revival. Sometimes those snake and cobra head types of designs, those are always popular. Whenever I have those for sale, I usually sell them pretty quickly. All right, so keep your eye out for those. All right, so now we are moving into earrings. All right, so earrings. Now, I have a hard time selling earrings. I think I've talked about this before, but I know a lot of you do really well selling vintage earrings and especially like the big, bold styles. So the good news is that that's definitely going to be holding strong in 2026, especially clip-on earrings. Did you know that clip-on earrings are making a comeback? Yeah, I don't know how or why that is, but according to the trends and according to some of the social media, yeah, clip on earrings are definitely making a comeback. So you want to look for oversized but clean shapes, matte or brushed finishes, as well as silver, gold tone, or mixed metal. All right, when we are looking at the types of earrings that will be popular in 2026, uh, I'm thinking that it's going to be more of a minimal stone or no stone because people still will prioritize comfort, all right? And nobody wants big, heavy earrings or earrings that get tangled in your hair or on your handbag strap. I know that's always something that a lot of us look out for. And then the styles that are going to be in demand are styles from the 1980s, 1990s vintage. Again, this is nothing new. I have been noticing this probably the past 6 months as it relates to my own reselling inventory. I've had requests for people asking for vintage 90s earrings lots, and they didn't care if they were clip on, pierced, or whatever, screwbacks, whatever. But I think that those are definitely going to be popular. So if you can find them, if you can source them, make sure you pick them up. All right, next up for earrings, we've got the dangly earrings with movement. This is also known as articulated. All right, so we've got drop earrings, we've got hinged or articulated designs, pearl drops, long linear shapes. I think that's kind of like the theme of what we're seeing in 2026, something that's long, something that is noticeable without being too obvious. All right, something that attracts attention without being too gaudy. All right. So the tiny studs, you want to kind of stay away from that. Now, I know that's always going to be a staple for some people, but when we're talking about style and design, people want something that is going to be seen. They don't want jewelry that's just going to blend in, with the background. All right. So make sure you choose something that is noticeable and something that has a little bit of movement as well. All right, next up for earrings, we do have small chunky hoops, not basic hoops. Now, you guys know big hoops are my signature style. I love wearing hoop earrings. I wear them almost every day. And it's funny because when I don't wear them, people notice. They say, "Where are your earrings?" So it looks like the big, thick, huggy style hoops are definitely going to be in demand in 2026. Also, pearl hoops, textured hoops, and sculptural or irregular hoops. All right. So, hoop earrings are definitely something you want to pay attention to. And the nice thing about hoop earrings is that they look good pretty much on everyone. So it's not like you have to have a certain face shape or something like that. Hoop earrings, I think, are flattering on all, all ears, all faces, all body types. All right, so hoops are definitely making a comeback. Now, in my notes, it says that what is out is exactly what I'm wearing. The thin, plain gold or silver style hoops. Like I said, for me, it's a basic staple in my wardrobe, so I will always, I will always wear it, regardless of whether it's trendy or not. All right, so now let's move into bracelets. So, when it concerns bracelets, I notice that a lot of times when it concerns trends, usually I just see people mentioning wearing bracelets and then stacking bracelets. But in 2026, it looks like we're kind of going more of the vintage route. All right. So, the big, thick, chunky, bold color bangles are definitely going to be seen in 2026. All right. Wide bangles, sets of bangles, solid metal type bangles, the real heavy kind of chunky ones. Silver bangles are especially going to be strong in 2026. And I think this has always been the case, especially when they are the like Native American silver. I think that's always going to be in demand. Some of them have, turquoise or other gemstones on them. Those are always popular and those seem to never go out of style. And those are always best sellers. So if you see them, make sure you pick them up. The vintage eras for this are the 70s, 80s, early 90s, pretty much what we're seeing across the board for all jewelry pieces. So make sure you keep that in mind that the older the piece, probably the better, right? But again, a lot of it's going to depend on the condition of the piece and whether or not it's still wearable, because sometimes you will find these pieces that are old and they may have damage or they may have flaws or they may have some other issues that don't necessarily make them wearable. Or sometimes they're just, discolored or whatever the case may be. All right. So that's what we got for bracelets. Oh, we've got another one here. I do have cuffs with texture. Now, I think this is kind of like what they call the brutalist style, although I know it's not, probably genuinely that. But anything that kind of shows texture, like those hammered cuffs or things that kind of look like they could have been um, purposely dented up. All right. I think people like that because it's very different and not everybody has that. And for the most part, the hammered look isn't very common. But it looks like that's what we're going to be seeing a lot of in 2026 because it can be casual as well as a little bit dressy. All right, you want organic or asymmetrical cuffs. Like I said, something that looks irregular, something that looks kind of like it's off pattern. Hand wrought or studio jewelry. And when we talk about studio jewelry, that means like more independent artisan type jewelry. All right. So, and usually those are one of a kind pieces. A lot of times they are unsigned. So, but that does not mean that they are not still valuable and not still highly in demand. All right. So, if you see something that kind of matches these designs, make sure you give it a look, right? And make sure the quality is there because it could definitely be worth picking up and reselling for a profit. All right, so now we're going to talk about brooches and pins. This is my particular favorite category as it relates to jewelry for reselling. You all know that my best sellers are brooches and necklaces. And if I could sell only brooches all day, every day, I definitely would. But as it relates to brooches and what's going to be popular in 2026, structural brooches, all right, abstract or architectural shapes, minimal stones, and also brooches that are purposeful, brooches that are functional. In other words, using a brooch to close a blazer, maybe as a sweater clip, maybe as an adornment on a hat, on a scarf, or something like that. Something where the brooch is actually performing a something useful. All right. So that's something that's going to necessarily, that's something that's definitely going to be in demand in 2026. All right. So when we are looking at brooches, it's not about just design. It's also about, does this piece do something else? Does it serve a function? I hope that makes sense because when I think about my brooches, I use them mostly as adornment, decoration, but I've also started using them on handbags and stuff like that. So, again, just something to think about. Now, what is out are the ornate rhinestone floral types of brooches. I know we've all seen those. I don't think those are necessarily going to be popular in 2026, not because they're not beautiful, but I think they're just so common and they are so mass produced by fast fashion. Jewelry places, stores like Temu, Forever 21. I've seen those really beautiful rhinestone, brooches, but as soon as you hold them, you can feel how lightweight and cheap it is. And a lot of times, those pieces don't last very long because the stones fall out or they break or whatever the case may be. So, those bright, colorful rhinestone brooches. I mean, if you find one that is vintage and is in good condition, definitely pick it up. But I wouldn't necessarily consider it a front runner for popular inventory in 2026. All right, so let's move on to rings. Now, we are going to be talking about gemstone rings and not stacks, surprisingly. Now, I know there are people who love to stack rings, because that's their style, that's their vibe, that's totally fine. But we're not going to be seeing ring stacks a lot in 2026, at least as it relates to what's popular and what's trending. All right, so when we think about gemstone rings, we're thinking about emerald, tiger's eye, sapphire, pink stones, and cabochon cuts. That's what I've got here in my notes. That's what I researched. And the thing is, when it concerns gemstones, they're always popular. They're always in demand, whether it's, precious or semi precious stones. And I think what it is that people like the unique individual style because, no two gemstones look alike, especially, when they are actual semi precious or precious gemstones. So the styles we're looking for are cocktail rings, east-west settings, bold single stone designs, and what is actually out is the minimalist plain band. I mean, of course, some people may wear that as a wedding band, but we're not seeing that for trends in 2026. We're not seeing like the stacking of just three plain bands like we saw in years past with the minimalist style. Now it's about, again, jewelry that is noticeable without being too over the top. All right, and then of course, I can't I can't not mention snake rings. All right, we talked about that in the necklaces section category. But snake rings are also going to be popular in 2026. And I'm not surprised. I think it's just an extension of the snake or serpent motif. concerning necklaces. So, of course, why would it not show up in bracelets and rings as well? All right. So, again, if you can find that snake motif, that serpent design, the cobra head, whatever, that's definitely popular. I think you want to pick that up. Maybe you might want to wear it for a little while because it's one of those things that I think people just are drawn to for some reason, right? People just love to look at that. And then they wonder, is there a meaning behind that? Like, why does someone wear that? How do they wear that? And I think it just creates a lot of intrigue and curiosity. And there's also an air of mystery behind this type of style. All right, so we've got wraparound designs, gold or silver, and look for pieces that have small stones in the eyes or as the eyes, right? Because that's definitely going to be a higher value piece when they put gemstones in where the eyes are. All right, and it also looks better too. So if you see that, pick it up because it's definitely going to be popular in the new year. All right, so we've got some honorable mentions here on my list. We've got pearls. Pearls are making a huge comeback. Now, I don't think pearls have ever truly gone away. And my favorite pearl expert, Matt Harris, always talks about how pearls are becoming more and more popular every single year, not just with the older generation, but with some of the younger generations as well. Now, the nice thing about 2026 is like we are seeing a focus on Baroque pearls, right? The pearls that are not perfect, the pearls that are irregular, that look kind of off or funny, things that just don't match. And I think that is exciting because that is a much more affordable pearl for somebody who may just be getting started with pearls or just learning about pearls. All right, so we want to look for irregular shapes, pearl drop earrings, pearl hoops, pearl plus silver or pearl plus mixed metals. All right, so pretty much anything with real pearls, not simulated pearls, but real pearls. All right, so if you come across that, make sure you pick it up. And if you want to learn more about pearls, I will link that podcast episode that I did with Matt. I think we did that about a year ago. I can't quite remember. But if you haven't seen it, it's very informative and it's a really fun episode. So I will make sure I link that for you. All right, so what we do not want to see, or probably what we won't see in 2026 as it relates to pearls, is the perfect tiny, what are called mall pearls. The pearls that you can buy in the mall, at the kiosk or in one of the mall chain, jewelry stores. That's not what we want. We want the pearls, like I said, that are noticeable without being too much. And because we are focused on Baroque pearls, like I said, they're going to be a lot more affordable and easier to find. All right, another honorable mention, we have watches. Now, this was interesting to me because, according to my research, according to the media, small face bracelet watches are coming back. Now, remember, those were kind of popular, I want to say, in the late 80s, early 90s, where a lot of women had those tiny, tiny watches that almost looked like dainty jewelry. Well, yes, that's making a comeback, and people are actually kind of moving back to wearing watches again, which I thought was also surprising. So many of us don't wear a watch because we have our phone and that's how we check the time. But a lot of people are moving back to wearing watches because it's just one less way that they have to be tied to their phones. So watches in general are making a comeback. A lot of people who typically don't wear watches are looking for like these small face, not too bulky type of watch styles. So that way, they can wear it and it doesn't, it's not too intrusive with, their clothing or with their job or whatever the case may be. All right. So looking for jewelry like bands, like I talked about, you want to look for watches that could pass off as jewelry, at least for women. Also, estate women's watches, because a lot of people like the older styles and the designs and the quality of vintage watches, of course, if they're still in working condition. And I think, watches are always popular, at least at least from my experience, a lot of people do like estate, watches and stuff like that. So if you come across some when you're outsourcing, make sure you grab them. Make sure, make sure they're worth whatever the price they're asking for. But what I do have in my notes here too, what is actually out as it relates to trends are the oversized sports watches. Now, I also just heard this because I've been paying attention to what's going on at CES. And I think CES is happening right now as I'm filming this particular episode. But smartwatches are also becoming more and more popular, and they're also becoming more and more stylish. So if you are looking for, a watch that tracks your steps or tracks your heart rate or whatever, those smartwatches are becoming a lot more stylish. So they don't look too, bulky and mechanical and generic. So that's another thing to, keep in mind too, as it relates to watches and what's going to be trending in 2026. All right. And finally, we've got metals and finishes. Sterling silver, always, always on trend. All right. So there's never a time when sterling silver doesn't do well. If anything, it's probably doing better now than it has in years. Okay. So if you find heavy silver chains, silver cuffs, silver rings, oxidized or matte silver, people still want it. All right. So pick it up if you see it and if you can get it for a good price. Mixed metals, again, that's always been popular. People love to put things together that don't typically belong together. Silver and gold. I've also seen people do silver and copper, which I thought was really interesting, but that seems to be kind of a more edgy trend as well. We also have pearls and diamonds and two-toned estate jewelry, whatever. All right, so if you have the mixed metals, maybe even in some cases, mixed materials, right? Like, I've seen some of those pieces where you have like a leather like cord mixed with silver and things like that. So, if it makes sense, if it doesn't look too cheap or too off. But again, the mixed metals going strong in 2026. All right, so let's talk about what is sellable, but not necessarily trend driven. All right. So we talked about basic gold hoops. I told you guys that I think hoops are always going to be in style, at least for me. The plastic bubble necklaces. Now, these are like some of those plastic beaded necklaces that you find like in fast fashion. Um, Again, it depends on the piece, right? Because I know some of the J. Crew designs, some of the Juicy Couture designs do have that kind of over the top, kind of bright, colorful style. Um, it seems like we're moving away from that, and we're moving away from the bright, loud, colorful statement pieces, the big bib necklaces that were like with the cheap beads and stuff. Now, I know some people love that stuff, but it's not really going to be on trend for 2026. So I'm just throwing it out there because maybe if you see it, you may want to pick it up, but again, I don't think it's going to be that popular in the new year. Also, loud designer logo jewelry, like now some people love this stuff, the big like the what is it, the double C necklaces. Now, a lot of that stuff is fake. So, buy it at your own risk. But if you're looking to buy it to resell it, it's I don't think that it's going to do very well because, like I said, a lot of it is fake, and then a lot of it is not well made because it's typically a knockoff of a more expensive brand. All right. Beaded cuff bracelets are probably going to be out, and then overly trendy novelty pieces are probably going to be out too. All right. And when I say novelty pieces, usually these are things that I want to say have like little cute designs, like, little puppies or something like that. All right. Those are the types of things that I don't think are going to really be in demand. Sometimes some of it will be. I'm not saying that all of this is going to be true for everyone across the board. But you're going to have to be discerning when you are outsourcing. And then as you are describing your jewelry pieces as well, you want to make sure that you're using some of these keywords so you can make sure that your pieces are found, all right, when people are searching for some of these trendy designs. All right, so let's talk about some of the designers that are going to do well in 2026. If you are looking to find jewelry that you can resell for a profit, number one is going to be George Jensen. I already mentioned George Jensen earlier in the podcast. Number two, Tiffany and Co., especially the vintage eras, always in demand. Number three, Taxco Silver. Again, I don't think this ever is not trendy. All right, especially as it concerns silver. I'm telling you, anything Taxco pretty much will sell very, very quickly for you. Also, David Yurman. Now, we're talking about the earlier, heavier styles. All right, not the newer stuff. We're talking about the early 2000s. That's kind of when the David Yurman pieces kind of had their heyday. So if you have any of that, or if you come across any of that, make sure you grab it. And then we also have the artisan studio silver jewelry. These are usually pieces that are going to be unsigned, all right, but you're going to look at the style and you're going to look at the material, especially if it's real silver. And that is how you are going to make sure you list these pieces and you describe these pieces, all right. And if you need help with that, I've created a tool for you that helps you identify, describe, and price your jewelry. And if you would like to learn more, all you got to do is head on over to jewelrybestie.com. All right, so that is what I got for you, jewelry friends. As it relates to the trends and styles for jewelry for resellers in 2026, these are some of the things that we want to pay attention to when we're sourcing, when we're listing, when we're comping, because the more you know, the better decisions you can make, and the better decisions you make, the more sales you can make, which in turn leads to more money that you can make, right? Remember, I always say that we're in this to make money, and there is no shame in that. So let me know your thoughts about some of these trends for 2026 as it relates to jewelry, especially as resellers. Do you think that this list or this episode is even relevant as a reseller? Because maybe not everybody cares about this stuff. Maybe not everybody is trying to pay attention to styles, designs, trends in the new year. So let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear your feedback. All right, you can leave a comment. I read and respond to every single comment left on this episode or on the channel. So that's going to be it. I hope you found this episode and this topic interesting, helpful, and fun. If you have any questions about anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, jewelry friends, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'll check in with you again really soon.